Some of the greatest horror shows ever made have vanished. They've been erased from pop culture like they never existed. But why? These weren't just cheap, disposable thrillers. They were actually terrifying, critically acclaimed, and had all the ingredients of classic horror. But unfortunately for us, they disappeared. Were they ahead of their time? Victims of bad luck? Or did something more sinister happen behind the scenes? From gothic horror masterpieces to forgotten cult classics, we're unearthing the dark secrets of these lost horror gems. Why were they buried? And more importantly, do they deserve to rise again? Let's roll in the grave. Starting off at number 10 is Penny Dreadful. Imagine a world where Dracula, Frankenstein, and Dorian Gray exist side by side, their fates intertwined in a nightmarish web of gothic horror. That was Penny Dreadful, a dark, hypnotic series that pushed horror television to stunning new heights. At the heart of it all was Eva Green, delivering one of the most chilling performances in TV history, as Vanessa Ives, a woman consumed by supernatural forces. The show wasn't just good, it was legendary. Critics raved, and Season 2 even earned a 100% fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes. But just when the series was reaching its peak, it was gone. Creator John Logan abruptly ended it after Season 3, insisting the story was complete. But was it? Fans weren't convinced. Many believed the show had so much more to explore, but Showtime pulled the plug, leaving audiences in shock. Now, Penny Dreadful has faded from the mainstream, buried under the weight of time. But should it stay forgotten, or is it time for this gothic masterpiece to rise from the grave? Let's dive into From, sitting at number 9, a town where no one can leave, a place where unspeakable creatures lurk in the shadows, waiting for nightfall. Sound familiar? From feels like a long-lost Stephen King novel, but it's something far more mysterious. Created by John Griffin and starring Harold Perrineau, From is a slow nightmare, expertly blending horror and mystery. Fans call it one of the most unsettling shows in years, and critics agree the first season earned glowing reviews and even scored 2 Saturn Award nominations. So you gotta wonder why From isn't a household name? One simple reason: it's trapped. Not in a haunted town, but on MGM+, a streaming service that many viewers don't even know exists. Had it landed on Netflix or HBO, we might be talking about it as the next Stranger Things. But could From still escape the shadows and claim its place in horror history? Or will it remain one of TV's greatest hidden terrors? Hannibal slices into the list. At number 8, for most people, Hannibal Lecter is forever linked to Anthony Hopkins. But ask die-hard horror fans and they'll tell you, Mads Mikkelsen's Hannibal isn't just better, it's legendary. Brian Fuller's Hannibal wasn't just another crime thriller, it was a visually stunning nightmare. A dark, artistic fever dream that redefined psychological horror. And at its heart, Hugh Dancy's tormented FBI profiler Will Graham locked in a mesmerizing, twisted dance with Lecter himself. But despite critical acclaim and a rabid cult following, NBC killed it off. Why? Simple. It was too dark, too bold, too disturbing for mainstream network TV. Yet, years later, fans are still demanding a Season 4, and Mikkelsen himself has said he's ready to return. So the question remains, could a streaming service finally resurrect Hannibal? Or will it remain one of TV's greatest unfinished nightmares? At number 7, we visit The Strain. With Guillermo del Toro at the helm, The Strain had everything needed to become a horror TV phenomenon. It wasn't just another vampire story, it introduced a terrifying new breed of bloodsuckers. And when the pilot episode premiered to 3 million viewers, it looked like FX had a massive hit on its hands. But then, something went terribly wrong. By Season 3, ratings plummeted. Fans started checking out. Some blamed inconsistent storytelling, others felt the show lost its bite, drifting from the pulse-pounding horror it once promised. Pulled the plug after Season 4, but by then, The Strain had already slipped into obscurity. What started as a must-watch horror event ended as a cautionary tale, a series that had everything, until it didn't. Visiting Tales from the Dark Side at number 6, before Black Mirror or Creepshow, there was Tales from the Dark Side, an eerie, offbeat horror anthology from the legendary George A. Romero. Throughout the 80s, it delivered bizarre, chilling, and sometimes downright nightmarish stories that still haunt those who watched. From possessed pianos to Halloween gone wrong goblins, the show was a perfect mix of campy fun and pure terror. It even spawned a 1990 movie spin-off, proving its horror legacy. So why doesn't it hold the same status as The Twilight Zone or Tales from the Crypt? One simple reason: it never got the big revival it deserved. No streaming resurgence, no flashy reboots, just a cult classic waiting in the shadows. But maybe it's time for Tales from the Dark Side to step back into the light. Could this be the missing gem of 80s horror nostalgia that fans have been searching for? Travel into American Gothic at number 5, a small-town sheriff with supernatural powers. A terrified young boy who begins to realize his father is a monster. On paper, American Gothic had all the makings of a horror TV classic. With Lucas Black and a pre-American Horror Story Sarah Paulson, the show had serious talent behind it. Critics praised its eerie storytelling, and it had the potential to become a genre-defining series. But CBS pulled the plug after just one season. Despite rave reviews and a devoted fan base, American Gothic vanished, becoming yet another horror show that never got the chance it deserved. Now, nearly 3 decades later, the question remains: could a reboot finally bring this lost gem back from the dead? Creepshow crawls in at number 4, a Stephen King and George Romero classic reborn for a new era. When Creepshow returned as a horror anthology on Shudder, it promised to deliver the same eerie, comic book-inspired madness that made the original film a cult favorite. And it did. From grotesque, pulpy nightmares to a monstrous, gelatinous terror straight out of a King story, Creepshow stayed true to its roots, packed with practical effects, over-the-top horror, and pure midnight movie fun. So why isn't it a mainstream hit? Despite strong reviews and a dedicated horror fanbase, Creepshow remains trapped in the shadows, never reaching the cultural dominance of American Horror Story or The Twilight Zone. Is it because horror anthologies are too niche? Or is it simply waiting for the right platform to unleash its full potential? Could Creepshow still crawl out of cult status and into the horror mainstream? Or is it destined to remain a hidden gem for die-hard fans only? Masters of Horror shines at number 2. In 2005, horror filmmaker Mick Garris, known for Sleepwalkers, Riding the Bullet, and Critters 2, brought together some of the biggest names in horror to create a one-of-a-kind anthology series for Showtime. The result? Masters of Horror, a brutal, twisted, and wildly entertaining collection of hour-long standalone nightmares. For 2 seasons, the show delivered memorable, terrifying moments, with standout episodes like Jennifer, Dance of the Dead, and the infamously banned Imprint. It attracted a dedicated audience, proving that horror anthologies could thrive on TV. But then, just as it was building momentum, Showtime pulled the plug. No season 3, no proper send-off. Garris reworked the concept into Fear itself for network television, but it never recaptured the same magic. Today, Masters of Horror is rarely talked about, a once groundbreaking series now buried in horror history. But should it stay forgotten? Or is it time to bring the Masters back? Channel Zero comes to life at number 3, a horror series based on creepypastas, the internet's most terrifying urban legends. What could go wrong? Turns out, nothing. Channel Zero was a nightmarish masterpiece, bringing online horror to life with chilling visuals, eerie storytelling, and some of the most disturbing imagery ever seen on TV. From cursed children's shows to cannibalistic nightmares, each season felt like stepping into a haunted corner of the internet. Critics loved it, horror fans swore by it. But after just 4 seasons, Sci-Fi pulled the plug. Why? Poor marketing, low viewership. A series this good should have been huge, but instead it faded into the shadows. A lost horror gem that never got the attention it deserved. But here's the thing, Channel Zero is still out there, waiting to be rediscovered. Could it finally get the respect it deserves? Or will it remain horror's greatest hidden nightmare? And finally, we have The Exorcist coming in at number 1. Yes, The Exorcist had a TV series, and here's the real shocker. It was actually good. Acting as a direct sequel to the legendary 1973 horror classic, the show followed 2 priests battling terrifying cases of demonic possession. With a cast that included Gina Davis, John Cho, and Alan Ruck, it had the talent, the scares, and the critical acclaim to become a horror TV staple. But after just 2 seasons, Fox pulled the plug. The reason? Low ratings. Despite strong fan support, it couldn't survive on network TV. Would The Exorcist have thrived on a streaming platform where horror shows like The Haunting of Hill House found massive audiences? Maybe. But instead, it became one of horror TV's greatest overlooked gems, waiting to be rediscovered by those brave enough to watch. Horror TV has always struggled to survive. No matter how brilliant or terrifying, too many great series have been cut down before their time, whether due to low ratings, poor marketing, or simply being too ahead of the curve. But horror never truly dies. With the rise of streaming, fan-driven revivals, and cult followings, some of these lost nightmares might still have a chance to return. Which of these horror shows do you think deserves a second life? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you love all things horror, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications because the scariest stories are far from over.